Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Sarah Baartman, a South African woman whose life was entangled with much hardship and exploitation. A painful story, but necessary to tell. Said to have been Sehura originally, Sarah was born adjacent to the Gamtoos River, Xhosa Kingdom, now Eastern Cape, South Africa. Born to a Kwa, Kwe and Xhosa family. A Dutch Cape colony in 1789. Sadly, Sarah was an infant when her mother passed, and soon after her father was killed whilst travelling with his cattle. She went through puberty rites, meaning cultural ceremonies, marking a person's transition from childhood to adulthood. As a teenager, she got married to a Kwa Khan man, and she fell pregnant. But unfortunately, that child died after Sarah gave birth. When Sarah was just 16, her husband was murdered by Dutch colonists, possibly because of tensions that came from land disputes and resistance to colonial intrusion. Not long after this brutal event, Sarah was sold into slavery to a trader man called Peter William Caesar. Peter transported her to Cape Town, and she became a domestic slave to his brother named Hendrik. She became a wet nurse, meaning she became a woman who engaged to breastfeed someone else's baby. Sarah's appearance, that pertained to her large buttocks, was deemed to be absolutely abnormal by European standards. It was simply the natural physique of some African ethnic groups. When Sarah was in her early 20s, she crossed paths with Alexander Dunlop, who was a Scottish physician. Alexander and Hendrik made the decision to use Sarah's body to make money. Sarah could not read, but she signed a contract that Alexander wrote that required Sarah to trek to England and Ireland, and marked her on the contract as an indentured servant. An indentured servant was an individual who agreed to work for around 4 to 7 years in exchange for food, shelter, and other basic essentials. And when that contract ended, the person was free to go. Hendrik, Alexandra, and Sarah lived in Duke Street, St. James, which was the most expensive part of London. Sarah was first exhibited in London at Egyptian Hall, which was located in Piccadilly Circus. That day was the 18th of November and the year 1810. Sarah's attention grew very quickly, and British abolitionists charged Hendrik and Alexander for holding Sarah against her will. However, Sarah declared that she was not being ill-treated. This is after Peter Caesar provided the contract that showed Sarah's signature, and the court granted the case for Caesar. This court case increased the popularity of Sarah, and she was exhibited all around England, and after 2 years deep into this arrangement, Sarah was taken on tours in Ireland. Sarah received little money to add. In the year 1814, Sarah was sold to S. Rowe, an exhibitor who paraded animals in France. The public shows proceeded. Rowe accepted patrons to abuse Sarah in these exhibitions, whilst he made a fortune of her mistreatment. Sarah was known as Hottentot Venus for these displays. Venus is used to pinpoint portrayals of the human body in Roman culture. Hottentot was a Dutch colonial term for the indigenous Kwa-Kwe people to other her. Sarah was the subject of scientific curiosity, not for goodwill, but for racist bias, and it's alleged that she was advertised as the missing link between man and beast. Georges Cuvier, who was a French naturalist and zoologist and a prominent figure in comparative anatomy, studied and conducted measurements on her body, which included her physical features such as her buttocks, which he and other scientists considered to be unusual and primitive. In laboratory-like settings, he believed that the physical traits of African people would be linked to animalistic qualities. Sarah was put on display at wealthy people's parties and even salons. There were times where a collar was put around her neck as a prop. Still, she received little money. Sarah died in Paris at the young age of 26 in 1815. As if she hadn't endured enough suffering and abandonment in her life, after her death, parts of her body were dissected by French scientists as they were interested in studying her features. They even preserved her private parts, her skeleton, her brain. To make this even more sinister, her remains were used for more scientific studies based on racist theories and the physical differences of racial groups. Her preserved body parts were also put on display at the Museum of Mankind in Paris, and her remains were put on display for over 100 years, highlighting her as an exotic, primitive, otherworldly specimen, and her body was a huge symbol for the dehumanization of black women. In 1994, Nelson Mandela requested for France to return her remaining body parts to her homeland of South Africa, and her body parts were finally buried in the year 2002. It's not stated whether Sarah really wanted to put herself on display